In the nation's capital, more than 1,000 students have gathered to study liberty. Should these students even be in college? If they work as interns, are they exploited? If they're here illegally, should being a student give them a quicker path to citizenship? Should they take drugs or drink? What should the rules be? A trip back to college. That's our show tonight.
And now, John Stossel.
I'm in Washington, D.C. for the biggest ever Students for Liberty conference. More than 1,000 students have come here to debate what the conditions needed for people to be free are and to prosper. And one way some of these students prosper is by doing internships. Most students now do them. So how many of you have been interns? Most. How many of you want to be? Just about all. How many of you did it or would do it for no pay? Fewer, but most everybody. I think that's a good thing. Often internships in my business are unpaid. And that's exploitation, says Ross Perlin. His book, Internation, argues that interns earn nothing and learn little. But Terry Michael, who helps students find internships here in D.C., says internships are great. And since I agree with him, I'll start with you, Ross. What's wrong with internships? It's a voluntary exchange.
Let's be clear, John, that we're not talking anymore just about doing a single short-term internship, getting training and experience, and then getting a job at the end of it. We're talking increasingly about doing this after graduation. We're talking about doing it multiple times. We're talking about it becoming a requirement in order to break into a whole range of white-collar fields.
All right, well, before we get to requirement, which is another matter, let's say they do it a bunch of times. So what? They volunteer.
The whole idea of a fair wage for a hard day's work, that basic value, that basic ethic in American society is being threatened by the rise of internships and of unpaid labor. Regular workers are being replaced by unpaid interns.
Because these college students will work for free. They're taking jobs of people who would be paid.
Increasingly, students have no choice. Internships are all that's out there.
Terry, this sounds terrible. If you can get these kids to work for nothing, kids won't get paid. It's abuse.
You know, we don't really have an argument about whether you should be paid. I'd like for all of you to be paid. The question is, what is compensation? And in that, it could be a line on your resume. That's compensation. If you are an intern for John Stossel's show, that's probably going to help you with your career. Hopefully, if you're an intern for one of my news bureaus that it takes my students, Houston Chronicle or the Chicago Tribune, that's going to help your career.
You help people find internships with newspapers, Washington politicians.
I bring students of this age to Washington each semester. I have for 24 years, put them in news bureaus as interns, but I give them 2 seminars a week about politics to make them better political reporters.
And none of these rich news organizations will pay?
News operations here have been downsized to the point that they're losing their own employees. They simply don't have the money. So it's either we'll have an intern and not pay them, or we won't have an intern at all.
All right, I have to say, I built my career on people like you. I mean, I apologize if I'm exploiting you, but I didn't think I was, because I needed research help. My employer laughed at me when I asked him for paid people. Said, "Do you think we're made of money?" And I started asking at colleges, and I was surprised that many students were eager to come. But afterward, they told me, I learned more from you working than from college, and I didn't have to pay you anything. I have to pay tuition to my college. It's the college ripping me off, not the internship. What do you say to that?
How much do you make, John?
A ton.
But not enough to pay $7.25 an hour to an intern?
Well, at that time, I wasn't making much. If I had to pay, I wouldn't have hired a college student. I would have hired a full-time employee. And these kids wouldn't have had the opportunity.
Let me ask you, why is it that many of the best companies in America, the Googles and the Deloittes and so many others, treat interns as an investment? Those kinds of companies, they pay their interns, they hire an overwhelming number of them. They try to hire 70% of an intern class.
That's their right. Good for them.
They're taking the longer view.
But who are we to decide for all of them? What about voluntary contracts between 2 people, student and a company? If they both agree, what business is it of government to interfere?
The same law that protects interns is also the one that got 14-year-olds out of the coal mines. Was that freedom of contract? There simply has to come a point where you have to understand what are the sort of
Coal mines,
Ross,
14-year-olds.
21st century. That's 19th century.
I don't see what the century matters. If you volunteer to go to the coal mine and your parents are okay, isn't that part of freedom?
I grew up as a teenage left liberal, I have to admit it, in the 1960s. In my own 60s, I've become a libertarian Democrat.
You're both
D.
Democrats.
There are about
here.
6 of us who are libertarian Democrats. I used to be press secretary for the Democratic National Committee because, so I understand this argument that somehow we are exploiting workers of the world and they need to unite and have the backing of the government to demand have the government demand that John pay his interns. But why? These people are not so stupid that they cannot decide whether they're being exploited or not. It's a contract, written or otherwise understood, and we should not use the coercive power of the state to demand that you pay your interns.
No coercive power is being used. The last 40 years have been a sort of libertarian's dream in terms of internships.
Well, the law hasn't been enforced.
That's why we have a culture of unpaid work with no government intervention.
Well, let's just be clear. You're both Democrats. It's Obama's Labor Department that for the first time came out with explicit rules. If you're not going to pay them, there must be certain criteria. One is the employer derives no immediate advantage from the activities of the intern.
Now, let's be clear,
On
John.
occasion, its operations must be actually impeded. I mean, I've had interns who impeded my work, and I tried to get rid of them. Interns help.
Let me ask you, John, if Fox wanted you to do a new show, and they said, well, we don't know how it's going to work out, but why don't you do it unpaid for us for a while? Maybe we'll throw you a little bit of academic credit. We'll see how it goes, and then we'll decide whether or not to pay you. Would you accept that?
Maybe, probably not at this point in my career, but it would be my choice. And that freedom is what America is supposed to be about.
Guess who is exempted from this requirement?
Who?
I won't keep you waiting. It's government. The Department of Labor uses
they don't have to pay.
interns. The White House uses unpaid
Only
interns.
for-profit companies.
Right.
John, this has
Exactly.
been the law since 1947. The Obama administration has done nothing but reiterate and reissue these basic regulations.
I run a nonprofit. If this rule were enforced, it would kill my program.
All right, now, you students have questions. Come on up.
Hi, my name is Christina Webb. I'm from Texas State University, and I'm currently a dietetics major. And in order to be a practicing dietitian, we have to go through a dietetic internship.
And the internship is unpaid?
Most of them are unpaid except for government ones. So my question is,
She's forced to do it? That's by her college? It sounds like the colleges rip people off.
This is the real question here. It's not whether she should be paid or whether she shouldn't be paid. It's whether she should have the right to decide what compensation is. Is compensation training? Is compensation a line on your resume? I just don't want these people to be under the thumb of the government, the coercive power of the state telling them, you can't do an internship unless you're paid. That's just silly. Do any of you think that you can't decide for yourselves whether you want to be paid with dollars as opposed to a line on your resume? Are you that stupid? I know you're not, because I have worked with 20-somethings for the last 24 years. You're smart enough to know whether to volunteer your labor or not.
Hi, my name is Michael Tonchev, and I go to the University of Maryland College Park. And I have a question for Mr. Ross. Coming to this from an economics perspective, we know that markets tend to move toward equilibrium. And that is, they tend to find the correct price for many different things, labor being one of them. And we know that if a person is being paid below the wage that he would get on the market for his true value, then another company will see the extra profit that he's bringing in and would raise his wage to capture some of that profit. So my question is, why does this work so well on the non-internship market, but all the interns are being paid nothing, essentially, as you say? How come the market suddenly doesn't work? Could it be, as Mr. Stossel said, that they receive non-monetary compensation, such as that line on their resume?
It's become a requirement. And where it's not actually a literal requirement for completing a degree, it's something that has become a virtual gateway or requirement, blocking access, a kind of pay-to-play system where you simply have to be able to do this. So I think it's having a distortionary effect on the market, and it means that all sorts of people are going towards it and kind of engaging in a race to the bottom that is leaving us with record levels of youth unemployment and record levels of unpaid internships, and there is a clear connection between the two.
Did you have a bad internship experience? You said you were an unpaid intern.
I was an unpaid intern.
I mean, you've done pretty well. You have a book here that exploits the whole perceived rather than real problem of exploited interns. I think, again, you have this mentality that somehow these people are being exploited. I think they have enough sense to make decisions for themselves.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is EM. I'm actually a college dropout because I am an internship success story. What do you think about something like that? I own a business now because the college was literally teaching me nothing, and my internship taught me everything.
I'm glad that yours did, and I'm glad that many people's internships do work. But the reality is that more and more people are getting caught in a kind of internship trap. They're becoming serial interns, doing 3, 4, 5, or more of them, and that youth unemployment is at record highs. So we need to rethink the system as a society, even though there are good examples that work.
We could ban that, and it would ban the so-called exploitation. It would also ban opportunity. I say thank you, Ross Perlin, Terry Michael. Coming up, why are you people even in college? Many of you are getting ripped off. We'll talk about that when we come back. We're back with some college students from the Students for Liberty Conference. So I hate to say this to you students, but you are suckers. If you pay college tuition, you're getting ripped off. All right, that's probably not fair. Some of you are learning a lot. Some will get jobs because of your education. But many of you will pay $200,000 and get little more than debt. It's the reason Dale Stevens dropped out of college and founded the website uncollege.org. It offers people ways to learn and get ahead without college. And his book, Hack Your Education, is subtitled Ditch the Lectures, Save Tens of Thousands, and Learn More Than Your Peers Ever Will. So what do you mean, more than your peers? There's a reason people go to college.
The reason people go to college is because they're told to. That's what your parents have done and your counselors tell you to, and that's what society says that you need to do if you want to be successful in life. But that also means that you have to learn exactly what they tell you and not necessarily the things that you want to learn or interest you.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to learn comic books and about girls. I wouldn't have learned anything if I didn't have a college directing.
Maybe you would have started a comic book about girls.
And people go to your website and tell you, you helped me drop out and I'm doing better?
Absolutely, yeah. We have a community of about 15,000 people around the world who are actively doing creative things with their education instead of going to school. So there's people like Hunter Payne, who dropped out of the University of Florida and is now being an independent artist, is getting murals commissioned, things like that. Thomas Summers, who convinced MIT to let him use space at their labs to build solar-powered computers. The people who are doing interesting things with their education that are being fulfilled and being passionate, but without having to pay the high cost of college.
And you did this yourself?
I actually left school when I was 12, so I didn't go to middle school or high school. And that entire experience...
Your parents let you leave school at 12?
They weren't exactly the biggest fans of the idea, but I presented it as, hey, I'm 12. If I leave school for a year, what's the big loss? If I go back a year later, school is still going to be there.
And you even took college courses. You found you could just go to a campus and walk on and not pay?
Yeah, I found that at the local community college, professors were more than happy to have students who were genuinely interested in learning and more than happy to share their knowledge.
But I would have just goofed off.
That's okay.
Students, do you have comments or questions for Dale?
Hi, my name is Heidi, and I go to school at Madonna University in Michigan, and I'm studying
where?
Madonna University. Yes, like the Material Girl. I'm going to school for nursing, and I have a lot of students that are going to school for pre-med or going to school for the sciences. And don't you feel like it makes sense for somebody to go to school and learn basic human anatomy and all these other classes, pathophysiology, that is sort of essential to a medical profession, or even like if you're going to study biology?
Imagine if you're going into surgery and you're given the choice of being operated on by someone who's fresh out of medical school or the nurse who'd been watching surgeries for 20 years. I would any day take the nurse. I mean, sure, there's a level of background knowledge that is handy to have when you're operating on someone, absolutely. But the idea that all of that comes in the classroom, I think, should be changed, and we should spend a lot more time being practical in the real world.
That makes sense, but at the same time, if you don't have that background knowledge and you just know what you do, sure, you've been like experiencing these things firsthand, but that doesn't mean you know what happens if you do something slightly wrong. You don't know how to fix your mistakes because you didn't get the basic technical knowledge that you would have learned in school.
And my challenge to that is the best way to learn that technical knowledge sitting in a classroom of 400 people taking intro biology, paying exorbitant amounts of money? Or could we get that knowledge in some cheaper, more efficient way?
Good question. Let's go to the next person.
Hi, I'm Ryan Jackson. I just graduated from a school in Indiana. I once witnessed an argument where a student defended her gender studies degree as just as valid as an engineering degree. And while I can't say that it's not a valid degree, it's just not the same thing. Where does that misconception come from? Is there a pinpoint source, and what can we do about it to make sure that people aren't wasting thousands of dollars on something that they're not going to use?
The Chronicle of Higher Education did a great story last year ranking unemployment based on college majors, and the college major that had the most unemployed people was psychology. There's really...
On that note, since I majored in psychology, next question.
Hi, my name is Amy Caper, and I go to York College of Pennsylvania. Isn't your method of unschooling only really practical if you wanted to start your own business or something like that? I want to be a teacher. I have to go to school. I won't be certified to teach if I don't.
You're making an argument against the credential required for public school teaching.
Yes. I would love to drop out of college. I think it is a waste of money, honestly, but I can't. I can't teach if I don't.
Yeah. One thing you might consider is teaching at a private school.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dale Stevens. Coming up, drugs and drinking and Whole Foods. But before we get to that, who should be allowed to come to America? That's next. We're back at the Students for Liberty Conference now to debate immigration. 12 million people are said to be in America illegally. What should we do about them, and what should the future rules be? Libertarians usually say, let more people in legally. Open immigration created America. Most immigrants work hard. Many bring valuable skills. On the other hand, some people do want to kill us. And now that America is a welfare state, some people want to come here to freeload. Bob Dane worries about that. He's from FAIR, the Federation for American Immigration Reform. And he'll debate economist Veronique DeRougy. She says it should be easier to come here illegally. But of course you say that because you sneaked in here from France and just became a citizen. Congratulations.
Thank you.
But this is America. Why should we let more of you foreigners in?
Because immigrants, whether they're high skill or low skill, they're a gift, an economic gift to this country.
But not just a gift, some freeload.
Well, I mean, there is some small cost, but when you take under consideration the tremendous work that they do, when you look at the data, they even increase wages for Americans.
All right, Bob will want to debate you about that, but just before we get to that, I want to go over you had to fill out this form to become a citizen, which I guess the whole process took you 10 years plus. But the questions seem ridiculous. Have you ever been a member of the Communist Party, a terrorist organization?
That's a legitimate question coming from France, right?
Could say that you were the French government's communist. Did you work for the Nazi government between 1933 and 1940? I mean, if you did these things, why would you even answer honestly? Have you ever been a habitual drunkard, a prostitute, been married more than one person at a time, gambled illegally? Bob, why do they ask this stuff? Is this supposed to make us safer?
It's your federal government at work at the best. Look, you know, here we are. We're in a room with a lot of wonderful libertarian thinkers, which is clearly a thinking man's ideology. But there is a problem that in the pure libertarian sense, you have this idea that there should be an unrestricted movement of human beings under the guise of sort of trans-global individual liberty.
Yes.
And by the way, Al-Qaeda thinks that's just a dandy idea.
Well, we'll try to keep Al-Qaeda out. We agree on that.
But what about the liberty of just the poor guy here in America who is struggling to find a job, to keep a job, to have wage credibility? And he is in a downward spiral of job opportunities and wages because of excess levels of legal immigration. The application of liberty may not be a zero-sum game, but let's face it, there are consequences to excessive levels of unregulated legal immigration.
Yeah, Veronique, you took some economist's job, or some economist gets paid less because you're here.
I think the data is overwhelmingly showing that I increased, actually, economic growth, but the issue is actually not even me. The beauty of immigration is like even low-skilled immigrants are actually good for this economy. They are benefiting not only high-skilled people like me or like all of the people working in Washington, D.C. because they mow their lawn and they watch their children, but also lower-skilled laborers because this is not a zero-sum game. The economy can expand. And in fact, the data is very clear. I actually think it's pretty much a no-brainer.
So if an immigrant paints my house, somehow we're all richer because the rest of us can specialize on something else?
Yes, actually, one of the things one of the ways is because he's cheaper, he makes prices much lower, prices of construction much lower for all of us.
Bob, that's been my understanding, that by this flexibility of a labor market, everything costs less and we can get richer.
You know, what you're focusing on is the gross domestic product. For example, if we were to provide and grant an amnesty to 12 million illegal aliens, yes, the GDP, the total sum of all goods and products manufactured in the United States would grow. But
because they'd stop hiding and they'd report more income.
Well, the more people you have, the bigger the GDP gets. But that's an abstract metric. It doesn't mean anything. It means squat for John Q. Public. Because when you flood the market with 12 million heavily government-dependent, lowly skilled, low-end jobs, the GDP is rising, but John Q. Public's opportunities for jobs and meaningful growth of his middle-class wages are eroding.
What would you do with the 12 million people who are here?
You remove them, John, as they are identified as by law, and you otherwise allow them to leave voluntarily of their own accord. If we had the incentives in place to dry up the jobs magnet, they would self-deport. It would be attrition through...
deport them or make it so hard for them to work that they leave on their own?
You dry up the veritable honeypot of benefits and the access to the smorgasbord of benefits, including sanctuary cities, driver's licenses, in-state tuitions, and my job and yours.
I mean, the idea that we can keep people out who want to come in is one that in practice has never worked. I mean, the government is spending more money on border security than it ever has, and people are still coming in. That we can deport everyone is a myth that actually rests on the idea...
Just deport them.
It rests on the idea that first the government can do anything correctly, if that was the goal, and second, I mean, and by the way, if we're worried about the welfare state, I mean, to me that is an argument to get rid of the welfare state rather than keeping people out. I mean, if you're worried...
To be clear, immigrants... If you're not legal, you're not eligible for a lot of welfare. Some you get automatically. The kids, if they're in school, we have to pay for that. Hospital emergencies. But food stamps, Medicaid, they are not eligible for that.
No, they're not. And by the way, this is important.
There is one thing I do want to say. I mean, FAIR, the Federation for American Immigration Reform, and some of our other groups.
Clever acronym. You sort of win with FAIR. We're automatically
fair. We are a bipartisan 501c3, but we are not anti-immigrant any more than somebody who perhaps is on a diet is anti-food. It is about regulation. It is about control.
But these people rarely collect welfare. They go on and they pay taxes.
Well, I don't know where you're getting your data. The cost of illegal immigration in the United States last year was $113 billion a year in 3 areas. And these were just federal costs: health care, education, and incarceration.
But these are the down costs. You're not including the up costs of them paying taxes and inventing things and starting Google.
Look, here we are with libertarians, and the focal point of libertarianism is a limited government, small government. Count me in, but check your thinking. Be careful what you ask for when you push for an amnesty plan, because the fact is that the overwhelming majority of 12 million illegal aliens are heavily government-dependent, poorly skilled.
Let me interrupt and ask you, how many of you are not from the United States? Quite a few. How many of you would like to come here and become citizens someday? Fewer, just a couple actually. You want to keep them out?
No. Look, we all succeed when immigrants succeed. We have here's what we need to do. Do we want skilled immigration? You bet we do. What we need is less immigration, and the immigration we do have should be skilled immigration.
Less? The 1.5 million is just 0.5%? Should be less
It's
than
the
that?
equivalent of the city of Dallas once every year. I mean, year after year after year. If you had more enforcement, which is completely non-existent
The U.S.
right
residents don't want to do a lot of those jobs.
Very low-skilled immigrants allow me to go to work every single day because you know what?
On that note, we're out of time. Veronique DeRougy, Bob Dane, thank you very much. Coming up, drinking and drugs. But before we get to that, the founder of Whole Foods is here to talk about evil business. We're back at the Students for Liberty Conference, and I want to ask you students, how many of you, when you graduate, think you will want to go into business? Raise your hand. Many, almost, maybe more than half. How many of you have friends or roommates who think business is evil, that it pollutes, hurts people? Even more of you. Well, you know, I know, they are wrong. Business has done more to lift people out of the misery and mud of poverty than any government poverty program ever has. And yet, it is still vilified, especially on college campuses like yours. I was a consumer reporter. I won Emmy Awards criticizing businesses and calling for government regulation to stop them from hurting people. And only after years of watching the regulation fail did I realize that even with no regulation, almost all businesses treat their customers well. They have to because business is voluntary. You make money by serving your customers well. And on TV now, I make this argument with facts and statistics, or try to, but that's stupid. Left-brain thinking, says John Mackey, the man who started Whole Foods. And his new book, Conscious Capitalism, says business is noble, and we better start explaining that nobility to people, not just numbers. What do you mean?
Business is the greatest value creator in the history of the world. I mean, business has, as you said, it's lifted billions of people out of poverty. Consider the fact that 200 years ago, 85% of the people alive lived on less than $1 a day. Today, that's down to 16%. As we embrace economic freedom, prosperity follows.
But I don't know how you would explain it to people. I'm trying. Even my closest friends don't get it. They say, yeah, it brings us some stuff, but by and large, it hurts people, hurts the environment. It takes from the poor, gives to the rich.
It's not true. I mean, business has lifted more people out of poverty in the last 200 years than any other thing that's ever existed. Business is a great value creator, and that's the story we need to tell. Otherwise, the critics, the intellectuals who've always hated business, they have captured the narrative. Business is selfish, it's greedy, it's exploitative, and that narrative needs to be challenged and changed.
And your book is called Conscious Capitalism,
right?
Meaning most of the people in business are not conscious of
Apparently not, based on what we've already said today. Most business people are not conscious of the great value that they're creating. They're always on the defensive. They're not able to articulate why business is good and how it's making the world a better place.
And what you do at Whole Foods, some people would call this lefty, silly, feel-good nonsense. What does it have to do with conscious capitalism? You sold people on Whole Foods as if it's better, which I doubt.
We create value for people. No one's forced to trade with our company. There's plenty of alternatives, competitive alternatives in the marketplace. They do so because they believe they're getting value in exchange.
Students, you have questions or comments for John Mackey, please come to the microphone.
I'm from Southern California. My name is Ryan. Why can't we defend profits? Why can't we look at profits and the profit motive and defend that from an ethical standpoint? Do we have to pursue purpose as our ultimate goal? Or doesn't profit have a place in our society?
Of course it does, and we should defend profit, but we shouldn't defend only profit. We need to defend these other aspects of business, the great value creation it's doing, not just for the investors, but for its customers, for its employees, for the supplier network, for the larger communities that we're part of. We should defend all of them.
Could you convince your fellow students defending profit? People think of profit as, he made profit, I must have lost something.
Well, usually I can talk to them, and like you've been doing, once you talk to them about how business is a voluntary exchange of two mutually agreeing parties, they start to see profit in a different way. And I have a lot of success when I really sit down with somebody and explain to them that it's okay for somebody to make a personal profit if they're offering a good or a product that somebody else wants.
On your book tour, you find it's just people are hostile to you and to profit.
Well, for the record, I'm running the most profitable food retailer in the United States. So I'm not against profit.
And what's this hostility? I mean, you experienced this on the tour?
Well, most people see that or believe in the zero-sum game, that if someone's gaining, someone else must be losing, kind of like sports. There's a winner and there's a loser.
Or politics.
The great thing about business, the great thing about capitalism is that it's a win-win-win-win game, where everyone that voluntarily exchanging is gaining through the exchanges, or they wouldn't be made. And so I think that's the story we need to tell.
Go ahead.
My name is David Hawes. I'm from Penn State University. What can we as student activists do on campus, in your opinion, to help make students realize the benefits of capitalism?
I think one of the most important things we can do is put things in a historical context. Most people are so ignorant of how much progress humanity's made in the last 200 years due to capitalism. The average lifespan 200 years ago was 30. Today it's 68, 78 in the United States, 82 in Japan. 200 years ago, 90% of the people were illiterate around the world. Now it's down to 14%.
Because of
capitalism. Yes, because of business. If you look at the whole history of human prosperity, it's been due to the invention of capitalism that's lifted humanity out of the dirt.
Thank you, John Mackey. When we return, drugs and booze. Actually, we'll just be talking about them. I say it all should be legal. That's next. We're back at the Students for Liberty Conference in Washington, D.C., where I'm impressed that 1,000 of you choose to spend the weekend debating things like Friedrich Hayek's ideas and constitutional psychology. When I was in college, I was more interested in alcohol, and alcohol was legal then. The drinking age was 18. But now it's 21, and most college students are younger than that, and of course, drugs are illegal. So, students, I assume none of you ever drinks or uses drugs, right? All right, I don't want you to incriminate yourself. Your parents may be watching. I'll ask, how many of you think that most college students break the drug or alcohol laws? Hey. Wow. All right, just about everybody. This show's special correspondent, Kennedy, was a TV personality at MTV when she was your age. She was 20. So you grew up in the music business, and there was no law-breaking, drug use there, I assume, at the time?
Well, there wasn't on my end because I made the choice to be straight edge, which was very boring for me, but there were drugs and alcohol and, dare I say, some marital relations by unmarried people around me that I didn't participate in, but...
So you were very straight.
Yes.
You were 20 years old, but you were at MTV, and musicians would ask you for drugs?
Yes, I'm glad you asked me, John, because I wrote a whole book about the 90s and MTV in that era, and there's a whole chapter dedicated to rock stars who tried to buy drugs from me.
What would they say?
Do you know where I can find some heroin? I'm like, seriously, look at me. I look like Lily Pulitzer in a homeless encampment.
So let's take your comments from students. Questions or comments? Come to the microphone. Yes.
Hi, my name is Bill Carr. I'm from University of Illinois. So I don't know if other people here saw the same thing I did, but when I was in middle school and high school, I felt like the bad kids or whatever had more access to things like marijuana than they did to alcohol. And marijuana is the one that's illegal. And so I was going to ask, do you guys know of any studies that have shown that when you make things illegal and put them into black markets, it's actually easier for kids and stuff to get them?
They have done studies with younger people in middle school and high school who say it's much easier for them to get access to marijuana than it is to alcohol.
It isn't a hard study to do because they just asked the kids, which is easier. Let me ask you, which, when you were underage, which was easier to get, alcohol or weed?
Oh, the reefer madness.
My name is Eugene Craig. I attend Bowie State University. How do we move the debate from a health issue debate to a personal right, personal responsibility debate?
Expose people to rationalism, and I would say show your friends America's longest war. It really opened my eyes to a lot of statistics and stories that I wasn't aware of, and it's a great entry point for non-libertarians and liberals. The drug war is a great issue because it rests on the foundation of freedom, and it is worth fighting for because there are dire consequences if we turn our backs on it and listen to the party line that drugs are bad, okay?
But stay there one second because I would also like to answer your question. And my answer is, I struggled with this too when I was first learning about liberty. And I said to this older, stuffy guy at the Cato Institute, okay, I can see marijuana being legal, ecstasy, but the scary stuff, heroin, crack, it's frightening. What might people do? And he said, well, do you own your own body or not? And I would think self-ownership ought to be a powerful argument.
Amen.
Hi, my name is Paulina. I'm from California. I agree with you. I think that drugs should be legalized. And we say this because the government shouldn't tell us what to consume, what not. But don't you think by legalizing it or allowing people to get access to drugs, I feel like the government would, just as we see it, start regulating it and get into it, tax it, and wouldn't you think that would kind of...
That's actually a really interesting question, and it's something that divides libertarians. Is it worth having legalization if there is regulation? Because that's a new hurdle to overcome. And I would say that anytime you can legalize, that's the first step, and then you can have the regulatory debate later on. But having drugs be illegal is downright deadly. It's dangerous. And, Ron Paul always made a good point, which was, let's say heroin was made legal right now. Who really wants to go out and jack their vein with heroin? I mean, it's so messy, and you need a syringe and a rubber band.
All right, but some people would, and the people who support the laws say many more people would use. That's intuitive, but there is no evidence of that. In Portugal, where they've decriminalized, there's no more drug use. In Holland, where weed is legal, fewer kids smoke. So we won't be able to resolve this tonight. Thank you, Kennedy. Now I want to tell you college students that maybe you should drop out of college. It's a rip-off college. That's next. Finally tonight, you could call me a hypocrite. Because tonight I trashed college, called it an expensive waste for many of you students, and yet I have a good job and I got it because I went to college. My first boss believed in hiring people who graduated from Princeton, Yale, or Dartmouth. I benefited from that credentialism, this belief that a college degree is evidence of a certain level of skill or knowledge, and some employers believe that. But I was a lousy student. My classes were mostly lectures. A pompous professor droned on. I retained barely enough of what he said or the reading to pass tests. But I didn't really learn much in college. Well, I learned about alcohol, poker, dating, and how to live with 6 filthy roommates who smoked cigarettes. And that taught me a lot. But if that's why you learn what you learn in college, I don't see why you need to spend $200,000 tuition over 4 years to get that. And that's typically what many of you spend. The politicians tell you to get ahead, you have to go to college.
We need to get you to college and get you ready for college, get you to college, and get you graduated from college.
Graduates from 4-year colleges earn nearly twice as much as high school graduates. An estimated $1 million more over a lifetime.
$1 million. That $1 million figure is impressive and true, but utterly misleading. It's based on comparing salaries of high school versus college grads. But that leaves out the fact that you college students are different from people who don't go to college. You who go to college tend to be more motivated. You study in high school. You're more likely to show up on time. And so you'll earn more money even if you never went to college. You're that population group that politicians and colleges cite the $1 million difference is disgusting. It's what we Consumer Reporters used to call a scam. But think about that before you go into debt to get some college degree. And these days, students are more likely to go into debt because over the past 25 years, inflation was about 100%. College tuition went up 400%. Tuition goes way up because politicians hand out so much student loan money and they say everyone must go to college. Look, if you're learning a lot in college and you want to pay, good for you. But know the facts. 1/3 of college graduates now work at jobs that require only a high school degree. 16% of bartenders now have college degrees. Everyone should go to college? Give me a break. That's our show. Thanks for joining us, and thanks to the growing Students for Liberty movement for helping students learn that what really counts is liberty.